What was the deal with that Cenobite in Hellraiser? Well, Pinhead is pretty obviously meant to represent a certain type of kinky sex, but there's a lot more to it than sadistic fun. To find out the real reason why Hellraiser went so hard, we have to look at what inspired the movie in the first place. And that means looking at the life and work of one man. Clive Barker has been called a literary superstar, a modern-day Dickens, and even the 20th century Poe. But whatever you call him, he is definitely responsible for one of the most prolific runs of body horror/erotica ever. And while some of his work can be traced back to childhood trauma, other elements were inspired by the author's own very wild sexual preferences. So let's explore the blood and chains behind Hellraiser's lustful horror. Even though Clive Barker had already published several novels by the time Hellraiser came around, he hadn't exactly broken into mainstream success yet. He'd actually become fairly well known in the genre world for a series of short stories published in the collection called The Books of Blood. When Barker started developing Hellraiser, it was originally going to be just another story in this series. In fact, he had planned to include it in one of the later books. So what exactly made Barker change his mind? One big reason was that he wanted something fresh. In an interview from 2016, he explained that after having written a bunch of short stories, he felt like they were getting a little repetitive. He says, "I was running out of ideas, and my editor kept saying, 'Write a novel, do something longer.' And I thought, I don't know if I can do that." But he did, because he had an idea that was long overdue. It was time to get graphic. As he sat down to write Hellraiser, Barker realized that all of his best stories had come from dreams. So he decided to have a dream about the Cenobites. And when he woke up, he wrote them down. Unlike some of his previous work, which had focused on gay male characters, this new story would focus on heterosexual sex. And Barker wanted to make sure he got it right. In order to research the female perspective, he turned to his friend and fellow writer Caitlin R. Kiernan, and she helped him flesh out Julia, Frank's lustful wife. Barker later said that he wanted to write a story about how women want sex as much as men do, but their desires can take different forms. For example, while men might want to dominate their partners, women often want to dominate themselves. But that's not to say that men can't enjoy a bit of self-control either. And that's where the Cenobites come in. Frank's sadistic side comes out when he wants to hurt himself. And that enjoyment of pain makes him unique among most of Barker's characters. And then there are the Cenobites themselves, who are always willing to help him indulge. After all, it's thanks to Frank's enjoyment of pain that they even exist in the first place. In the novella, Frank receives the puzzle box, known as the Lament configuration, in the mail, without any way to open it. But eventually, he figures it out and steps through the portal he opens. He immediately finds himself in hell, but it's not quite the hell he expected. He quickly meets the leader of the Cenobites, whom we'll later come to know as Pinhead. But unlike his movie counterpart, this Pinhead is female. She explains to Frank that the realm he stepped through is neither heaven nor hell, but somewhere in between. Then she asks him, "Have you come to help us, or to be helped?" This is what makes the Cenobites truly special, because they aren't inherently good or evil. They're just willing to do whatever anyone asks them. It doesn't matter whether someone needs a miracle or is seeking to do evil. The Cenobites are here to help. And that willingness to fulfill anyone's desires is really what makes them so terrifying. But this isn't to say that they're not also extremely sexy. And that's because the Cenobites represent the fulfillment of any desire, no matter how dark or erotic. While writing the novella, Barker drew inspiration from a number of sources, including the Marquis de Sade, a French philosopher who was also a prolific writer of erotic horror. Sade's influence can be seen in the frank depiction of sexuality throughout the story. But Barker was also heavily influenced by the occult. That's why the Cenobites perform many of their acts with ritualistic flair. In fact, Some critics believe that the Cenobites are meant to represent the 7 deadly sins, while others see them as stand-ins for the 7 archangels of Christianity. But perhaps the most interesting thing about the Cenobites is that they have no leader. Instead, they operate as a hive mind. This allows them to be more flexible and better serve whoever they're interacting with. After all, if they had a leader, they would only be able to offer the desires of those who are allied with that ideology. So while it may seem like Pinhead is in charge in the movies, it's not quite true. He's just the one who speaks the most. So what does this all mean for the nature of Hellraiser? Is it just a really kinky horror film? Well, yes, but it's also so much more. The Cenobites are meant to represent the darker side of human nature, our willingness to do whatever it takes to get what we want. They're also meant to represent the power of our desires. No matter what they are, the Cenobites will always be there to help us fulfill them. And it's that willingness to help us face our darkest desires that makes them so scary. When we think about the Cenobites, we often think about their gruesome appearance, and that's for good reason. They're covered in hooks and chains and other instruments of torture. But their appearance is meant to be shocking. It's meant to make us uncomfortable. The Cenobites aren't meant to be beautiful, but they're also not meant to be ugly. They're simply meant to be other. They're meant to be different from us. And that's what makes them so fascinating. Their appearance is meant to make us confront the darkness that exists inside all of us. It's meant to make us confront the things that we're afraid to admit exist within our own psyches. And by confronting these things, we can learn more about ourselves. So the next time you watch Hellraiser, keep an eye on the Cenobites. They might just teach you something about yourself. But it's also worth noting that the Cenobites are meant to be seductive. Despite their gruesome appearance, they have a strange beauty to them. A beauty that's both alluring and terrifying. This is intentional on Barker's part. He wanted to create characters that were both scary and sexy, and he definitely accomplished that. The Cenobites are the embodiment of our darkest desires, but they're also the embodiment of our sexuality. Our sexuality is often seen as taboo, something that we shouldn't talk about or think about too much. But Barker's Cenobites show us that sexuality is a natural and important part of the human experience. The Cenobites are also meant to challenge our perceptions of what's normal and what's not. They show us that there's a lot of gray area in this world. Nothing is black or white, good or evil, normal or crazy. In fact, what's normal for one person might be crazy for another. The Cenobites are an extreme example of this, but they force us to confront the fact that we're all different, and that's okay. Well, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. And remember, we have a new follow us on social media for all the latest news and updates. Thanks for watching.